Hey guys, what's up? So with Duel Links, we're now receiving a brand new pack that's going to be introduced as of today. This is supposed to have mainly support, as it suggests, for the spellcasters. As it from the it's the Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight. This is a powerful card, as well as support for the Speedroids and Predaplant cards. So I'm going to do a quick review of what these cards are. So the first card is the cover card. This is Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight. It is a Dark Dragon Fusion effect monster. That's a level 7 with 2,600 attack and 1,700 defense. And its fusion materials are a Dark Magician Girl and a Dragon Monster. It must be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials or with the Eye of Timaeus. Once per turn, as a quick effect, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard and target one face-up card on the field and destroy that target. This card will actually make both the Dark Magician and the Dark Magician Girl's archetype a lot stronger. As of yet, there aren't that many cards that have this kind of quick effect. The only one I can remember offhand is there is a form of barrel dragon, I think it's called blowback dragon, which can activate and destroy on both players' turns. It triggers during your opponent's battle phase as well. This, in a sense, is better because it not only targets monsters, but it actually targets face-up spell and trap cards, so this actually works as a good form of disruption. I can see this being quite popular and for players to be picking up more on the Dark Magician support. If they need to get anything, they'll probably actually put some more investment into focusing on getting that. But most of the Dark Magician cards have been released, and I can see this being one of the kind of higher tier decks for this upcoming format. We have Battle Wasp Hammer, the Conquering Bow. This is a Wind Insect Synchro effect monster with that's level 8 with 2,800 attack and 2,000 defense, and it requires one tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. That means it's a generic synchro. If this card was synchro summoned using a synchro monster as material, it can make a second attack during each battle phase. You can only use each of the following effects of Battle Wasp Hammer, the Conquering Bow once per turn. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can make all monsters your opponent currently controls lose 1,000 attack and defense. And at the end of your battle phase, if your opponent has not taken any battle damage this phase, you can inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each Battle Wasp monster in your graveyard. So I think this card is quite powerful. It can actually be splashed into not just the Battle Wasp archetype, although it's specifically meant for it. That's why it's kind of got the second effect attached to it. The ability to go into a second attack actually works well with, for example, Black Wings. Because you can actually synchro in, they can kind of synchro up from some of their weaker ones, from like their level 5s or into some of their higher level monsters. So you can actually get a synchro monster as a material a lot better within something like that. The other benefit is these attacks don't have to be made on monsters. They can be made directly as well. So if your opponent is kind of running low on life points, you can actually finish the duel at kind of as and when you want. The effect to reduce your opponent's monsters is actually quite decent as well. If you can bait your opponent into kind of having more than their strongest monsters on the field, or even if you're able to kind of raise this to a certain point, you can weaken your opponent's monsters. So if you've got other monsters that are potentially weaker than this card, they can be able to run over them. And also, sometimes you don't necessarily know what your opponent's running. If they're running cards like Impenetrable Attack, Wabuku, I think Hallowed Life Barriers in the Duel Links as well. If they're running cards like that, or cards that avoid damage for whatever reason, having that kind of burn ability, even if it's only a few hundred points of damage, every 100 points of damage counts towards your opponent's demise. We have Predaplant Chimera Felicia. This is a dark plant fusion effect monster that's level 7 with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. And all it requires is a Predaplant monster and a dark monster. Once per turn, you can target one monster on the field with a level less than or equal to this card and banish it. When an attack is declared involving this card and an opponent's face-up monster, you can activate this effect until the end of this turn. That opponent's monster loses 1000 attack, and if it does, this card gains 1000 attack. Once per turn during the next standby phase, after this card was sent to the graveyard, you can add one polymerization spell card or fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. So I really like this card. It's had play within the original Yu-Gi-Oh! It's incredibly popular and diverse for what it does. For one thing, you're able to instantly get rid of a monster with the equivalent level or less. And this is a once per turn. This isn't just a once for effect. This means anything that might have any graveyard utility, for example, maybe, I don't know, Elemental Hero Neos, for example, can be removed, and it'll be difficult for your opponent to kind of recover that. You're able to kind of get rid of their key components from their deck. This being able to actually get over certain monsters is also quite decent as well. One of the most popular decks currently out there tends to be, for example, Blue Eyes, White Dragon decks. That would make their Blue Eyes White Dragon a 2000 attack monster, and that would make this a 3500 attack monster. That's always a good way of kind of running over your opponent's monsters more easily than not. Also, don't forget, this card actually retrieves a polarization or a fusion card once it's sent to the graveyard. This is a decent effect, not only within its own archetype, which is fusion based. If you remember, this was used by one of the villains within Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V, and his main monster was the Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Being able to do this means you can maybe splash a Predaplant engine into, say, for example, the Elemental Heroes or Destiny Heroes, especially because you have a multiple of they just require dark monsters, so you can splash this into any sort of dark attribute deck as well, just to provide a little bit more consistency. I would also note this works well with one of the I think it's the Jaden and Ubel characters' abilities, which has lets you draw into super polymerization. So if your opponent is running dark attributes, you can use that effect against them. So we have Witchcraft Ashrita. This is one of those newer archetypes to be brought out. So actually, this shows a commitment from Konami to kind of looking into providing newer support, not just the older cards, which are a little bit more competitively viable. It's fire attribute spellcaster level 4 with 1800 attack and 600 defense. During the main phase, as a quick effect, you contribute this card and then discard one spell. Special summon one Witchcraft monster from your deck, except Witchcraft Ashrita. You can banish this card from your graveyard to send one Witchcraft card from your deck to your graveyard, except a copy of itself. You can only use each effect of Witchcraft Ashrita once per turn. So this card is actually quite key for the deck. It has a decent stat attack stacked to it. The ability to go into one of your more powerful Witchcrafter cards means you can actually bring out some of them which have some interaction with negating or making your spellcasters more powerful. This also helps to support the deck as they have some recovery and interaction with their graveyard, which is why the second effect is actually makes this card maybe having to run maybe 2 or 3 of. The next card is Witchcrafter Madame Pierre. This is one of their boss monsters. They also have one that's also an attack one, but I don't think that's in this pack. It might be supported a little bit further down the line. This is a light spellcaster effect, level 8 monster with 1000 attack and 2800 defense. And it says, during damage calculation, if your spellcaster monster battles an opponent's monster, as a quick effect, you can reveal any number of spells with different names in your hand, and if you do, your battling monster gains 1000 attack and defense for each card revealed, until the end of this turn. You can discard one spell to negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls, until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Witchcrafter Madame Pierre once per turn. This is a good card to actually splash into some of the Dark Magicians or some of the other spellcaster support, as they often prefer to be running spell cards, whether that be normal spell cards, typically normal spells, but they do run field spells and continuous spells on occasion. The interaction with this is brilliant, because if you can keep a certain number of spells in your hand at all times, your spellcasters gain 1000 attack and defense for each of them. So even if you've got some of your weaker ones, say you only have 2 spell cards in your hand, that's an instant increase of 2000 points. And since this is a quick effect, this works during both yours and your opponent's turn. So unless your opponent is able to actually rip the cards out of your hand, the interactions they're going to have are quite difficult. Also, potentially they could get rid of this card, but with 2800 defense, unless they're running specific removal, you're not exactly going to be attacking with this card. Most players leave this in defense mode, in the off chance that cards such as you've got Dimension Prison, you've got Sakuretsu Armor, Widespread Ruin, Drowning Mirror Force, all of these kind of interaction cards that you really don't want to be having to deal with. The second effect is not as useful, but it could be good to kind of disrupt your opponent if they are going into some of their combos, as it kind of stops them in their tracks. The High Priestess of Prophecy is a light spellcaster, a level 7 with 2500 attack and 2100 defense. And it says you can reveal 3 spellbook spells in your hand and special summon this card from your hand. Once per turn, you can banish one spellbook spell from your hand or graveyard, then target one card on the field and destroy that target. This is the main boss monster of the spellbook archetype. You have these spellbooks running as well. This is kind of going away from the main interactions of your other spellcasters. For example, Dark Magicians and Dark Magician Girls are both standalone decks, but they combo well together. This is only really relevant for its own archetype, because even though you can run the spellbook spells within the Dark Magician archetype, the problem with running them is you can end up removing cards that actually might be better fitted with the Dark Magicians, as they have their own spell and trap support. Whereas if you run this in, say, you can make a generic spellcaster deck, but just you run the spellbooks alongside with this, that would be more effective than to try and work on a deck such as Dark Magicians, where they have enough archetype support to not need additional support. Now, this was a card I was particularly excited for. Masked Chameleon is an Earth Reptile Tuner effect monster. It's level 4 and it has 1600 attack and 1100 defense. It cannot be normal summoned if you control a level 5 or higher monster. When this card is normal summoned, you can target one monster with 0 defense in your graveyard, special summon that target in face-up defense position. Its effects are negated, and you cannot special summon any other monsters except from the extra deck during the turn you activate this effect. So this card is, I think, brilliant for what it does. You can easily go into level 8. There are some monsters out there that have 0 defense, such as Goblin Attack. I think Goblin Attack Force, and there are other cards with 0 defense. Running this is, you need it as a 3 of, because if you can actually just put cards into your graveyard, sending them through some of the effects of some of the attribute knights, for example Altitude Knight, and some of the others, Armageddon Knight is another one which is for dark attributes. Sending those monsters to the graveyard, if you summon this, you can bring those back, and you can potentially go into some of your higher level synchro monsters, your level 8s, more easily, maybe even level 9 if you want. It has a lot of use and actually is one of the stronger and more widely used tuner monsters with that I can see being pushed into the game. The next card is the Evil Eye of Saline. This is, the Evil Eyes came out at the same time as the Witchcrafters, so I can understand why in the same point they came out in a physical pack, that they're actually coming out in a virtual pack. It's an equip spell which says equip only to an Evil Eye monster. It cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effects. Also, your opponent cannot target it with card effects. Each time you activate the equipped monster's effect, or you activate another Evil Eye spell or trap, the equipped monster gains 500 attack, and if it does, you lose 500 life points. This attack gain remains even if this card leaves the field. If this card is in your graveyard, you can pay 1000 life points, then banish one Evil Eye spell or trap card from your graveyard except Evil Eye of Saline. Set this card. You can only use this effect of Evil Eye of Saline once per turn. I'm not too familiar with the Evil Eye archetype. It wasn't something that's been brought up as that powerful. This equip card, if it was for any other archetype or even say generic, it's actually brilliant for what it does. It avoids destruction in battle. It avoids any interactions with card effects. In fact, to deal with this card, you would actually have to remove this card and then deal with the monster it's equipped with. Traditionally, people have tried to kind of have more interaction to just get rid of a monster, because as the equip is attached to a monster, say for example, you have Acts of Despair. Often by dealing with that, you've dealt with the whole situation. You kind of have to reverse that kind of thinking. It's the same with the equip spell Power of the Guardian. If your monster has kind of a counter on it, then you remove that counter to prevent its destruction. That's why you kind of have to rely on dealing with this. Not that often will your opponent really be running that many spell and trap removal cards. I think Cosmic Cyclone is the popular one. You do in the ancient gear archetype as well. People do run things like Double Cyclone, Twister, as a way of removing their own cards, because they can actually bring out their own ancient gear monsters a lot easier as well. But other than that, this is quite a decent card. Every time a Evil Eye spell or trap is activated, the attack gain is provided, and the fact that this attack remains even once this card is removed is quite decent. Normally, most equips that give attack gain is only just for when the equip is still on the field. This still remains. The only disadvantage I'd say is that you're losing the 500 life points, but you know, if you're running certain cards that kind of boost your life points, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so this is the last of the ultra rare cards, and this is Spellbook of Wisdom. It is a quick play spell card which says target one spellcaster monster on the field, then activate one of these effects. That face-up monster is unaffected by other spell effects this turn, or that face-up monster is unaffected by trap effects this turn. This is, I would say, is actually the best kind of spellbook card out there. If you're just wanting for just running within just generic spellcasters, this could be splashed in easily into a Dark Magician deck, or maybe a Silent Magician deck, just because, for example, the Silent Magicians prevent your opponent from activating spells, so you'll always want to call for traps to be negated. This is decent because this enables you to actually end the game. There are times where your opponent might not actually have anything, say they might have one or two back row, and you're questioning to yourself, is this going to be a Drowning Mirror Force? You stop yourself from attacking, and actually it ends up being a bit of a bait. That actually it's not anything to be worried about. On the reverse, sometimes it is a Drowning Mirror Force, and you just look to yourself and thinking, why didn't I leave a monster in defense mode? You might not have had enough damage to put on board, but you thinking, oh, that's it. You've put yourself in a situation where you have now lost. This card is kind of a good out for those cards, just as a reasonable effect. I would say there are a couple of cards that kind of interact before this, so you need to be careful of that. One of the key ones, for example, is Raigeki Break. If that's activated second in the chain, that reverses the chain, and where that effect activates first and destroys the monster before the trap immunity kicks into effect. Okay, so these are all the cards from the ultra rares. I will be making videos for the others as well, for the secret rares, the rares, and the commons. This is quite a long video, so I'm kind of trying to break them up a bit. What do you think of the this pack? Is there anything you look forward to? Is there anything you're really interested in, or are you concerned that actually is going to change the direction of the meta too much? Whatever you think, leave your comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.